Hey guys, it's Mallory here with All About Cats. In this week's video, we're going to be taking an in-depth look at another incredibly popular cat food brand, and that brand is Rachael Ray Nutrish. So in case you're new to our cat food brand reviews, I want to give you a quick rundown of how this works. So we're going to go pretty in depth in this review, taking a look at the company's background, their sourcing and manufacturing practices, their recall history, and we're going to take a closer look at a few of their most popular recipes. If you want to jump to any particular section in the video, you can always use the video navigation in the description in order to jump to a part that interests you. While you're in the description, you'll also find a link to the complete written version of this review, which goes into a little more detail on everything mentioned here. So that being said, let's jump into the review of Rachael Ray Nutrish. The Rachael Ray Nutrish brand was created in 2008 as the result of a collaboration between a pet food company called Ainsworth Pet Nutrition and Rachael Ray, the celebrity cook. So this was 2008. 1 year after those massive melamine recalls really shook up the world of pet food. And at the time, people were extremely suspicious of the pet food industry. So I think the idea of Rachael Ray Nutrish was to get a really well-trusted, well-loved celebrity to be the face of their first foray into the world of premium pet food. And this strategy seemed to work really, really well. So by 2017, Rachael Ray Nutrish was named America's fastest growing pet food brand, and it was purchased for about $1.7 billion by J.M. Smucker. So Rachael Ray Nutrish is, again, a really, really big brand. You're going to find it in just about every grocery store chain. You're also going to find it in a lot of other retailers like Target, Dollar General, Kmart. You'll also find it in pet specialty stores like Petco and PetSmart. The foods are marketed as kind of premium natural products that are available at a budget-friendly price point. They offer a pretty generous selection of both wet and dry foods, and these are broken up into several different grain-free and grain-inclusive lines. Now that we've gotten a little bit of background on the brand and what Rachael Ray Nutrish has to offer, let's talk a bit about their sourcing and manufacturing processes. Where are these foods coming from and how are they made? So it appears that Rachael Ray Nutrish dry food is manufactured in 2 Ainsworth Pet Nutrition owned facilities in the United States, and that their wet foods are made in Thailand. Most of their ingredients are made in the United States, Canada, various locations around Europe, and in New Zealand. Rachael Ray Nutrish claims that none of their ingredients are sourced from China, although it's hard to say that their vitamin packs are not sourced from China. The vast majority of synthetic vitamins, minerals, and amino acids on the market do come from China, and it's really difficult for a company to avoid that. The next thing that I want to talk about is recall history. So Rachael Ray Nutrish food was recalled once in 2015 due to potentially excessive levels of vitamin D in several varieties of their cat food. While that 2015 recall was the only time that Rachael Ray Nutrish food was recalled, it was also involved in a class action lawsuit in 2018. So in this lawsuit, Rachael Ray Nutrish was accused of misleading labeling. Some of their foods were found to contain glyphosate, which is an herbicide commonly found in Roundup, and according to the lawsuit, doesn't really fall into the general public conception of what a natural food would contain. Of course, the label natural doesn't have a very firm legal definition, and it doesn't mean that the food won't contain trace amounts of herbicides. In fact, this type of herbicide, glyphosate, is used to treat a lot of crops that are used in pet foods, including those labeled as natural. At any rate, this case was ultimately dismissed. According to the judge overseeing the suit, the foods didn't contain levels of herbicide residue that were in excess of the FDA's regulations, and they concluded that any reasonable consumer would not assume that a natural food was free of these types of herbicide residues. and therefore the labeling was not considered misleading. Now that we've taken a look at the Rachael Ray brand as a whole, I think it's important to take a closer look at a few of their most popular recipes. So I went out and bought a little selection of Rachael Ray foods, and we're going to be kind of zooming in on a few of their most popular formulas. The first recipe that I want to take a look at is their real chicken and brown rice kibble. So again, this is a really popular Rachael Ray formula. You may have fed it to your own cat at some point. The food is primarily made from chicken and chicken meal as its first two ingredients. But brown rice, even though it's in the name, is not the next ingredient. Interestingly, that ingredient is corn gluten meal. Now, the reason why I find this interesting is because on the package and on the Rachael Ray Nutrish site, all of the marketing says that the foods don't contain ground corn. Well, ground corn is not the same thing as corn gluten meal. So these foods are not corn-free foods. I've noticed a lot of reviewers complaining that this kind of labeling is misleading. I just find it interesting. Later on the ingredient list, the food does contain brown rice, as well as a lot of other plant ingredients. Overall, this is a really plant-heavy food that doesn't really honor your cat's needs as a carnivore. According to the guaranteed analysis, the food is approximately 40% protein, 16% fat, and 44% carbohydrates on a dry matter basis. Overall, even though cats really like this food, I wouldn't recommend it and I wouldn't choose it for my own cat given its extremely high plant content. The food costs about 9 cents per ounce, adding up to roughly 18 to 20 cents per day for a typical cat. Next, let's take a look at their chicken with lentils and salmon recipe. So this food claims to be formulated for cats who live indoors. Typically, this will mean that the food is higher in fiber and lower in calories than foods not formulated for indoor cats. Similarly to the last food we looked at, the food's ingredient list begins with chicken and chicken meal, which are both good sources of animal-derived protein. In addition to that animal-derived protein, it contains a lot of plant-based protein. That salmon mentioned in the name of the food appears pretty far down the ingredient list, so it's not a prominent protein source in this food. Overall, this is a really plant-heavy kibble with high carbohydrate content and a lot of protein from plants rather than animal ingredients. According to the guaranteed analysis, the food is about 40% protein, 14% fat, and 47% carbohydrate on a dry matter basis. Considering that your cat has zero need for carbohydrates in their diet and that excessive starch could increase their risk of developing diabetes, this looks like a really starchy and species-inappropriate food for your cat. Like the first food that we mentioned, this food costs about 9 cents per ounce, making it one of the cheapest foods on the market. Finally, let's take a look at one of Rachael Ray Nutrish's wet cat foods. So this recipe is their Tuna Purrfection tuna in a savory sauce recipe. So as the name suggests, this food is primarily made from tuna in a thickened broth. I noticed that this food seems to contain a lot of thickeners. So it contains carrageenan, cassia gum, and xanthan gum. While cassia gum and xanthan gum both appear to be relatively safe, carrageenan has a kind of nasty reputation. It's not necessarily going to be harmful, but there is a chance that it could increase inflammation, and it's just generally an ingredient that we would prefer to avoid. Overall, while this appears to be meat-based food, it seems to go pretty heavy on the thickeners as well as the fiber additive cellulose. So according to the guaranteed analysis, this food is about 50% protein, 26% fat, and 23% carbohydrates on a dry matter basis. Now, that's a pretty high carbohydrate percentage, especially for a wet food. Again, your cat has no nutritional requirement for carbohydrates, and it's recommended that your cat's diet be no more than 10% carbohydrates on a dry matter basis. This food costs about 31 cents per ounce, adding up to roughly $2 per day if you're feeding a typical cat. Breaking things down according to the All About Cat standard, we give Rachael Ray Nutrish a 5 out of 10 in terms of species appropriateness. Again, their foods tend to contain quite a lot of plant matter, whether they're wet or dry. We also give them a 5 out of 10 in terms of ingredient quality. Their foods, while they do emphasize those clearly named ingredients, also tend to contain some rather cheap ingredients like corn gluten meal and other plant-based, arguably filler ingredients. In terms of product variety, Rachael Ray Nutrish is doing relatively well. They offer a fairly generous selection of foods in both wet and dry varieties, and both grain inclusive and grain-free options. So we give them a 7 out of 10 in this area. Rachael Ray Nutrish foods appear to be a little bit better than similar foods at the same low price, so we give them an 8 out of 10 in the price category. In terms of customer experience, Rachael Ray Nutrish is doing relatively well. Cats typically like the foods, and a lot of people are probably going to like that the company contributes to the Rachael Ray Foundation and potentially helps to support organizations that could improve life for both pets and people. But at the same time, Rachael Ray Nutrish does get some complaints. So, of course, we know that we had that class action lawsuit back in 2018. I've also seen a lot of complaints from people saying that the foods are misleadingly labeled by saying that they don't contain ground corn and then they contain corn gluten meal. So overall, we give them a 6 out of 10 in terms of customer experience. Finally, we give Rachael Ray Nutrish a 4 out of 10 in terms of recall history. Of course, their recall history is far from the worst. They've only been recalled once, but we're going to give them a 4 out of 10 according to the All About Cats standard. Overall, that adds up to a 35 out of 60 rating, or a C grade. All right, so that's about it for our review of Rachael Ray Nutrish cat food. I hope that this video gave you a better understanding of what Rachael Ray Nutrish food is all about and whether or not it could be a good choice for your cat. If you would like to learn more about Rachael Ray Nutrish, again, there's a link to our complete written review in the description, and there you'll also find links to all of the products mentioned here. While you're in the description, you'll also see a link to sign up to our free Recall Alert program, which is one of the best ways to stay informed and keep your cat safe. Again, I hope that you found this video helpful. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. It helps us a lot. And if you have any questions about Rachael Ray Nutrish or cat food in general, or really anything else, please let us know in the comments. We check them all the time and we'll be sure to get back to you as soon as possible. And if you haven't already, I'd encourage you to hit the subscribe button and click the notification bell so that you can get the news every time we release a new video. Thank you so much. Bye.